Hello, welcome Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 3 Village Studies in India, let us start our topic, the context. After the colonial administrators, ethnographers, it was the young discipline of social anthropology that took up the study of Indian village during the 1950s and 1960s in a big way. This new interest in village social life was a direct offshoot of the newly emerged interest in the study of the peasantry in the Western academy. Emergence of the so-called the new states following decolonization during the post-war period had an important influence on research priority in the social sciences. The most significant feature of the newly emerged third world countries was the dependence of large proportion of their populations on a stagnant agrarian sector. Thus, apart from industrialization, one of the main agenda for the new political regime was the transformation of their backward and stagnant agrarian economies. Though the strategies and the priorities differed, modernization and development became common program in most of the third world countries. Understanding the prevailing structure of agrarian relations and working out ways and means of transforming them were recognized as the most important priorities within development studies. It was in this context that the concept of peasantry found currency in the discipline of social anthropology. At a time when primitive tribes were either in the process of disappearing or had already disappeared, the discovery of the peasantry provided a new lease of life to the discipline of social anthropology. The village community was identified as the social foundation of the peasant economy in Asia. It is quite easy to see this connection between the Radcliffean notion of peasant studies and Indian village studies. The single most popular concept used by anthropologists studying the Indian villages was Robert Redfield's notion of the little community. Among the first work on the subject, Village India Studies in the Little Community, was brought out under the direct supervision of Redfield. He even wrote a preface to this book. Having found a relevant subject matter in the village, social anthropologists, many of whom were either from the West or were Indian scholars trained in the Western universities, initiated field study in the early 1950s. During October 1951 and May 1954, the Economic Weekly published a number of short essays providing brief accounts of individual villages that were being studied by different anthropologists. These essays were later put together by M.N. Srinivas in the form of a book with the title India's Village in 1955. As mentioned above, McKim-Marot's book Village India also appeared in the same year. Interestingly, the first volume of Ruler Profiles by D.N. Mazumdar also appeared in 1955. S.C. Dubey also published his full-length study of a village near Hyderabad. There was a virtual explosion of village studies in the 60s and 70s. Although social anthropologists were the first in the field which they dominated throughout, scholars from other disciplines, political science, history, economics, and so on, were also attracted to it. Though most of the studies provided a major general account of social, economic, and cultural life of the rural population, some of the later studies also focused on specific aspects of the rural social structure such as stratification, kinship, or religion. Now let us move to the next point, field and the field work. An anthropologist typically selected a single middle-sized village where he or she carried out an intensive field work, generally by staying with the community for a fairly long period of time, ranging from 1 to 2 years, and at the end of the stay, he or she was supposed to come out with a holistic account of the social and cultural life of the village people. The most important feature that qualified these studies to be called anthropological was fieldwork component and use of participant observation, a method of data collection that anthropologists in the West had developed while doing studies of tribal communities. The participant observation method was seen as a method that understood social life from within in terms of values and meanings attributed to it by the people themselves. Now let us move to the next point, perceived significance of the village. The discovery of peasantry thus rejuvenated the discipline of social anthropology. In the emerging intellectual and political environment during the post-war period, anthropologists saw themselves playing an important role in providing authentic and scientific accounts of the traditional social order, the transformation of which had become a global concern. Many of the village monographs emerged directly from the projects carried out by the sociologists and social anthropologists for development agencies. These included studies by Dubey, Mazumdar, and Lewis, who studies a village near Delhi. Lewis was appointed by the Ford Foundation in India to work with the program evaluation organization of the Planning Commission to help in developing a scheme for the objective evaluation of the rural reconstruction program. A typical anthropologist, unlike his or her economist counterpart, saw the village in the context of cultural life lived by the people and the way rural life was interlocked and interdependent, which baffled social engineers as it could not be geared to planned economy. It was here that the economists needed the assistance of sociologists and anthropologists. Though they were supposed to only assist the big brothers, the economists, in the planning process, the anthropologists viewed their perspective as being superior because they alone studied the village community as a whole, and their knowledge and approach provided an indispensable background for the proper interpretation of data on any single aspect of rural life. Their approach provided a much needed corrective to the partial approach of the economist, political scientist, and social worker. Anthropologists criticized the economics and official planner view because they tended to treat people like dough in their hand. The fact that people had resources of their own, physical, intellectual, and moral, and that they could use them to their advantage, was not recognized by those in power. While economists used quantitative techniques and their method was more scientific, the anthropological approach had its own advantages. Anthropological studies provided qualitative analysis. The method of anthropology required that its practitioners selected a small university which could be studied intensively for a longer period of time to analyze its intricate system of social relations. However, not all of them were directly involved with development programs. In fact, most of them saw the relevance of their works in professional terms. Taking a position against the close involvement with official agencies, Srinivas argued that the anthropologist has intimate and first-hand knowledge of one or two societies, and he can place his understanding at the disposal of the planner. He may, in some cases, even be able to anticipate the kind of deception a particular administrative measure may have, but he cannot lay down policy because it is a result of certain decisions about right and wrong. Thus, maintaining a safe distance from the political agencies was seen to be the necessary because, unlike economics, social anthropology did not have a theoretical grounding that could help it become an applied science. The relevance of studying the village was viewed more in methodological terms. The village and its hamlets represented India in microcosm. For the anthropologist, they were invaluable observation centers where he or she could study in detail social processes and problems to be found occurring in greater part of India. Villages were supposedly close to people, their life, livelihood, and culture, and they were a focal point of reference for individual prestige and identification. As an important administrative and social unit, the village profoundly influenced the behavior pattern of its inhabitants. Villages were supposed to have been around the hundreds of years, having survived years of wars, making and breaking up of empires, famines, floods, and other natural disasters. This perceived historical continuity and stability of villages strengthened the case for village studies. Carrying out village studies during the 50s and the 60s was also important because Indian society was changing very fast and anthropologists needed to record details of the traditional social order before it was too late. Underscoring this urgency, Srinivas wrote, "We have at the most another 10 years in which to record facts about a type of society which is changing fundamentally and with great rapidity." Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.